Yeah, so I mean, this might sound hippie-ish or radical, but I believe that we have a spiritual obligation to care for the earth. I feel that, and I really do. It drives what I do in my research and my teaching, and so I feel like all of us need to do that. Unfortunately, most of us don't know what we can actually do, and there's some practical things that we can do to have a healthier planet. And one of them, I think, is thinking about waste. As the population of the earth is increasing, I mean, we got a lot of billions of folks on this planet and growing. And I think the earth has a tremendous carrying capacity. I think it can handle a lot, but we need to be smart. And especially in areas where we have large concentrations of humans, we generate a tremendous amount of waste. And I think the more that we can do to keep waste out of the landfills, the better. I think we should be not sending our grass clippings to the landfill, for example. I think we ought to be, using a mulching mower. I mean, that's just one example. But composting is another one. So if I can reduce my waste stream and have less of what I generate as waste going to the landfill, and the good news is it's win-win. I mean, if I can generate a product that's useful on my property that helps me grow food that we like to eat, I'm not too crazy about, saying I got to grow every drop of food, but I think in general, it's a good idea for folks to grow some of their food. I think it's healthy for the planet. I think it's healthy for us to have that healthy food supply. And so if I'm using my waste stream and recycling it and putting it into my plants, I just think that makes a ton of sense to keep those nutrients in a non-concentrated place. There's nothing bad about the waste itself. It's nutrients. It's the nutrients we need to survive. We need them, plants need them. The problem is when we just get them concentrated into a one place, like in a landfill, it starts to become a problem. I mean, we can pollute our water supplies, et cetera. And so I think it's wise to kind of spread the waste out a little bit. And I think the more of us that are doing our own composting, it's going to reduce transportation costs. So that's fossil fuels. Again, I think it's a wise thing to do that. But I also admit that it can be a hassle. I have been frustrated and I'm just tired of this. You go out and create a compost bin and then you got rats in there and flies, and I've had all those problems, and it takes forever. You got different piles and it doesn't look good. So to me, this has been kind of a breath of fresh air. It's like, I can put this in there. It reduces my waste. I put it in for months, and we don't have a lot of waste in my house. And so the average family probably wouldn't be able to go months, but it just sits there and reduces the size of my waste load. And then eventually I can take it out and go out and use it in my yard. Yeah, so I do a lot of research. Compost is just a small part of what I do. If you wanted to categorize my research, it is looking at nutrient and water management. That's really what I focus on. And so one of the water management things that I've been working on is looking at using different grass in northern climates to try to conserve water. And so it's kind of a long story, but briefly, when I first came to BYU, I like my students to actually see and feel things instead of having to just learn out of books. And so I planted all of the common grasses that are grown throughout the United States in my demonstration plots. I have 30 of them. 30 different grasses. And there's two types of grass. There's C3 cool season grasses and C4 warm season grasses. And not surprisingly, in Provo, Utah, which we're in a cool climate, all the warm season grasses die out over the winter, which would be normal, except for a couple. And really notably, hybrid Bermuda grass did not die out. And at first I thought it was just a fluke. And then year after year after year, and so I was already aware that it didn't take as much water to grow this grass. So then we began doing research, and for the past several years we've been doing research and being able to push, how far can we go? If you wanted to sort of summarize what we found, is that we did a trial over the last 2 years where we had Kentucky bluegrass, which is the #1 grass that's planted, including in Utah, but throughout the United States and even the world, it's #1. And then we compared it to this hybrid Bermuda grass. And we had multiple treatments with these grasses. We had optimally irrigated, mild drought stress, and severe drought stress. So the severe drought stress, we just shut the water off, no irrigation. and which is, you can't do in Utah. Utah's very dry. We have to irrigate our plants to get through the summer. Well, after about a week, Kentucky bluegrass began to show signs of stress, which was not a surprise. It was 6 weeks, the first round, before the hybrid Bermuda grass began to show signs of stress. Now, it got a tiny bit of rain, but not much, and so that was really a shocker. So then we repeated it the second half of the summer, and it did the same thing. And we did it on 2 different soil types. One of them was really sandy, which doesn't hold much water. And then on more of a normal loam soil, we did it. And then we repeated it this last summer in 2024. It was a little hotter, drier summer, and the first round, it went 3 weeks on the sand and 6 weeks on the loam. And in the second half of the summer, we turned the water off at the end of July, and we never did turn it back on. Now, granted, we had about a week of rain in August, so I don't want to try to, so it depends. I don't want people running around saying, oh, you don't need to water it for 6 weeks. Well, that's not necessarily true. It just depends on conditions. But whatever it is, it's going to take a lot less irrigation than normal, which is important environmental principle. It's, again, one of the things that we're trying to do is help our planet be more responsible to the planet, including especially in the Western United States and other arid regions. We've got to figure out ways to survive with less water and still have plants. I really didn't believe you. I'm always willing to be open-minded, and when you offered to, let me use one in my own house, I thought, well, yeah, I've always composted at my house, and it's an exercise in frustration. And so I thought, well, we'll try something new and see what happens, and then it was a surprise. Yeah, it does. That was my biggest surprise is, I drop a banana peel in there, and sometimes I'm lazy. You guys told me to cut it up. I wouldn't even do that. And it would still be gone the next day. Eggshells, mostly gone. And so most of the waste that I've tried, there's really no visible waste left the next day. Now I realize it's still, in the process of composting, but it's a rapid composter. Yeah, and before I started doing the research, I just started putting it out on my own garden. I put it on strawberries and my vegetables. And in some cases, I just put it out on top as a mulch, and in some cases, I mixed it in to the soil and followed guidelines for about a 4-part soil, 1 part compost, or frankly less in most cases because I didn't have enough compost to do what I wanted to do. But I had good luck. It seemed like it worked well. I didn't have any problems. We started doing some research here in our greenhouses at Brigham University, and we did run into some problems, and that's part of what we want to do. We want to test the system. We want to find what doesn't work. And so the compost, if it comes out and it's fresh, it still needs some curing time, and we kind of pushed that a little bit to see what would happen. And sure enough, it'll be a little bit, it's still generating some heat. It'll not be kind to seedlings if it's not cured. So I think it's important to let it cure either in the composter itself or sitting out. So like at me at my house, we're just continually putting stuff in, and so it never really has a chance to completely finish. So in fact, sometimes what I'll do, like if we're gonna go away for the weekend or something, then I'll say, okay, well, when we get home, where it's had a couple of days with no new additions over a couple of days, then I'll go ahead and take it out. And then I feel like it's a little better cured at that point. But then even then, if I'm gonna really do a heavy dose, what we found in our research is that we wanna let it sit and kind of cure and let it get to where there's no heat. We want it to be at room temperature. That's, I think, the thing to do. And then even then, I would recommend after mixing it with soil to leach it with some water, just to kind of run some water through. And we've had a little bit better luck when we do that. We've had really good luck with mature plants, like if we transplant seedlings into the soil compost mix. The only time we've really had any trouble is when we're planting seeds directly, and again, the compost hasn't been fully cured. I think it's general. That's the short answer, but it's a little complicated, necessarily so, because composting's a process, and so it depends on what it is. If you buy some compost that's sitting around, like I did, I've done a lot of research on all kinds of compost, everything from wood waste to manure. I've spent most of my life working with manure compost, but all that stuff, it has to decompose. And there's a process. The microbes are going to decompose it, and they will heat it up. If it's really hot, probably not a good idea to be putting plants in it. It needs to kind of at least get to the point where it's it's calmed down a little bit. But even then, it's not completely done. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to go too heavy. I think it's good to mix it with soil, and whether we're talking about Reencle or others, I think it's probably a better idea. Compost is really rich in nutrients, which is good, but too much of anything is not good. I mean, too much of nutrients can kill us and kill plants. And so compost is really concentrated nutrients, and so you need to kind of dilute it a little bit with some soil. I think that makes sense. It's going to behave a little differently because it's so fresh and kind of young is the way I would say it. Like, for example, I did some research where I was doing some work on some compost that had been composting for decades. So it's really just done, right? It's completely, it's almost like peat moss. And that's another one to think about, right? You think about peat moss that's been there for millennia. And that's just plant material that has sat there and kind of slowly decomposed over time. And it's got some similar properties, but it's an old material, right? In fact, I really wouldn't even call it compost. But it's an organic material that's decomposed over time. I mean, that's what it is. So I do think you need to pay attention to the age, how hot it is. And then, like I said, I think it's a good idea to dilute it.